Hello, everyone. I'm JEAN-CLAUDE Beyond Mystic, and welcome to today's special report. This is the Alien Invasion follow-up. With me today, of course, is the one and only Cliff High. You can find his work at Cliff_High on Twitter, as well as here on his Substack. Cliff, welcome back to the show. How are you, man?
I'm doing fine. Well, I'm doing as well as anybody.
I just had a show the other day where I'm like, oh my God, JC, stop fucking with our brains. And it seems that we're going to be fucking with your brains a little bit more here, Cliff, today. Thank you for being on, folks. And thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. We are triple casting right now on YouTube, X, and Rumble. In a couple of minutes, we are going to cut the YouTube feed so that we can have this no-holds-barred conversation with you guys here today. Really appreciate you being on this last minute here for this very special report. Now, Cliff, before we start, I'd like to make this a standalone video for perhaps the people who haven't seen anyone in case this goes viral, so they have a little bit more of a backdrop here for the conversation today. And it starts really with your 39 days to melee video. Can you just quickly maybe take the first 4 or 5 minutes there, explain what you had way back when in the data in 2009, how that led to Trump, Rogan interview, and where we are today? Take that first 5 minutes, Cliff.
Okay, so in 2009, we had a forecast of a podcast. Podcasts weren't really well known at that point, of an unknown president with a podcaster that was going to be a temporal marker for our entering into sci-fi world. It's a temporal marker. It just marks things. It's not a precursor. It doesn't mean that it had to happen in order that this other stuff would happen. It was just shown in the data as highlighting it as sort of like, a signpost on the way, right? But anyway, so the temporal marker is a signpost was a Trump interview. And in that data in 2009 was this thing about 39 days later, we would have conditions for melee. Melee is when an organized contention breaks down into everybody fighting everybody else with whatever is at hand, last man standing wins, that kind of thing. It's not a good outcome, not a good situation. We now, in that 39 days was after the temporal marker. And so that would have been December 3rd. And sure enough, pretty much on schedule, all of the organized contention around these drones and the UFOs and all of that kind of stuff started rising up, as well as the other organized contention within the humanity with, the Elohim worship cult doing all of the color revolution in Georgia and getting everything head up in Korea and all of this kind of stuff, right? They're doing everything they can to create chaos in order to hopefully get enough chaos that Trump can't come in. That's my supposition. Okay, that's why I think they're doing it. There may be deeper issues there, though.
Could it also be as above, so below, as we're having contention in space, maybe that it's somehow translated into anything?
I don't see it that way. I could see it as above, so below, only in the sense that the Elohim worship cult believe themselves to be chosen by the Elohim, their space gods, to rule humanity. This cult believes that they have the right to farm humanity. This cult also knows that they have to report to these space aliens. And if the space aliens come back, the cult, in my opinion, is afraid that if the space aliens come back and see their herd, which is humanity, in such disarray, that they would take it out on the herd management guys, the Elohim worship cult. Okay, so it may be that at that level, but it's sort of a cover your ass kind of a thing. In any event, though, we're into the period of time where we've got nation against nation, we've got revolutions, we've got unknown drones over the country, military bases, we've got the migrant crisis, all of these crises coming to basically all frothing up at the same time. And this is going to be the conditions for melee. And melee erupts when the command structure breaks down, and we're in the midst of that now. You can actually watch our civilian and military command structure break down in real time with what's going on with the so-called drones.
In New Jersey? Yeah.
In New Jersey, right. Yeah. Okay, the command structure is absent, the governor doesn't show up, the military is saying bullshit that we all know is bullshit, blah, 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 blah. So obviously they don't control anything. And so the next thing up is that people will react to try and control their local circumstances. So basically, if there's a drone over their house, they're very likely to shoot at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now very quickly on the melee part, people can go and watch your video. I have a notes page also. If you guys go to beyondmystic.net/notes, you'll see the link to those past interviews and those past videos and Substack articles from Clough High. But I wanted to ask you precisely also, in terms of the melee, you've described it as basically fighting within the fighting and outside of a generalized structure or military structure. And so that implies, as you're just discussing now, the military not talking to the police, vice versa, and militaries fighting each other, and perhaps also people fighting each other or fighting another contingent. I want you to maybe drill down on that human aspect. What does it mean to the guy on the street to be in that melee as per the data right now? What's showing up?
Okay, well, so, all right. So the issue of the melee and just the guy in the street over these, well, right now it's not that degraded, okay, but it's going to degrade fairly rapidly as things push forward. So we're in the process of actually seeing the military abandon authority. They're abandoning authority by saying, oh, no, we don't, there's no mothership and there's no drones from Iran, okay? But we don't know what they are, and you shouldn't shoot at them, right? And we're not taking any action against them. So, so this creates an authority hole into which the melee forces will start emerging. All right. So if you're on the street, you're not going to see necessarily a cohesive command structure. I would not count on any social services to be operational as we go forward. This would include police, fire, any of these guys, right? They may be otherwise directed by what authority still exists for operations that we're not aware of, or they may have just basically packed it in.
Yeah, they might just go, fuck this shit, I'm going to go protect my family.
Exactly. I was just going to point out that's what happened in 1938 with the War of the Worlds broadcast in the radio, right? A surprising effect that wasn't really noticed very much at that point was how many fire stations emptied as all the people ran home. Same thing with police departments. It was something of a mess over the next few days, getting everything sorted out because so many people abandoned their posts in New Jersey at that time. So, and it was only 100 miles or so from where the drones are now. Right. That was the theoretical start of this War of the Worlds. There's a couple of things to note here, all right? It's, you have to, in my opinion, you have to take anything that authority says as being, oh boy, I hope they believe it, So, so if they say it's from Iran, well, look at the logic of that, right?
I saw that video earlier today. I do have it on the slide deck. We'll play it for the audience here in just a moment. We'll comment on maybe why that's not very logical thinking for the most part for now. But let me do this in order as well. So I wanted to go back to your Substack. Just earlier today now, you've just pushed out another piece called, not this one here, but the Trump's problem. Hold on, let me see if I can get this one. It's Trump's problem now. Can you maybe make a quick resume of this particular one and how that ties in how to the melee and how also our official may or may not respond here moving forward, Clough?
Okay, so so this gets into the other one from today as well because they're interlinked, right? And so the premise is the same, that the aliens know how dysfunctional our officialdom is, and they will not use officialdom in order to make official contact between our species, which they must do because humans are being, we're very bad neighbors. Even our regular nuke plants just sitting there making electricity cause problems for the galactic navigation and communication system because of a scalar energy. Okay, anytime you concentrate lots of nuclear radiation into a single location, nuclear materials, you get a scalar energy out of it. The scalar energy is distorting to the systems that the aliens use for communications and navigation. I'm assuming that they've got some method of isolating or blocking our bad behavior with the nuke plants, but what really scares them are the nuclear weapons, which they can't block ahead of time, other than to come here and mess with the electronics so that they don't go off, right?
Which there's evidence to suggest they've done before, yeah.
Right, which is they've done before. But that's actively messing with the matter here on Earth, as opposed to setting up some kind of energetic shield, right? Which is what I think they do for our nuke plants. But so we're kind of a problem to the space aliens, and they've decided that they, for a lot of reasons, one of which was basically told to us in 1947, they're here now, and they've got to get us to become aware of what we're doing with our nuclear stuff and to not do that. And so the aliens, in my opinion, are not going to be working through officialdom in the distressed, dysfunctional republics now. They may very well decide to go and talk to Putin, okay? And they would talk to a lot of different governments that are not their enemies. But anybody in the 5 Western republics, anybody controlled by NATO, has been actively, aggressively shooting these guys down. And so we're not going to be their first point of contact. This is going to cause Trumpsters all kinds of problems, because they don't want that level of it. It's the same thing that motivated the government at the time in 1947 that got us into this problem right now. It's this fear of something getting out of their grasp, this fear of loss of control, right? And so they're going to react to their baser inhibitions, is my thinking. And the aliens are not going to be dealing with them that way, but they must deal with humanity, and the time is now. I actually think that they told people back in 1947 that this shit was going to go down shortly, in about 80 or 90 years, right? So they knew in advance that this was coming. Mm-hmm. I also think that the 1947 introduction of technology was supposed to seed our civilization such that we wouldn't be nuclear buttheads, but also we wouldn't be paranoid about contact with an advanced social order.
Okay, before we get into the rabbi's bigly mistake, sure. That might be language a little bit too complicated for YouTube. We'll cut the video before we get into that one. Yeah. But before we do that, too, on this particular issue of Trump's problem, now, during this new administration, we've seen somewhat, and I think it's valid, an openness from this administration to basically take input on who should be applying for some very key positions. People who presumably were ostracized in the last number of years who might have a role. We've seen that already with the COVID file. Now we're hearing rumblings that there are perhaps some UFO guys also who've been on the circuit for a number of years that might be considered to be part of this Trump administration. Is that all hogwash at this point? Or is the administration trying to find a way to be relevant in this next communication with ET if in fact ET doesn't want to talk to them? What's going on there? What have you heard recently?
Okay, so I've heard hogwash about certain personalities, that there's just no basis for the statements being made that these particular individuals would be included in any kind of an officialdom capacity. Okay. And I haven't been able to find any supporting even leaks from the officialdom side. This is mainly from it's sort of like a hopium from some of the influencers, right? Now, but it is quite true, the latter half of your statement. There's a lot saying that the officialdom now, that the Trumpsters have people as yet unidentified that are in the process of poking the administration from the outside to see where they could insert individuals that may have an awareness of our situation and thus may be able to do some good in some of these roles. Okay, so how much these individuals that are doing the analysis know about what's coming, I don't know. And so this makes it a little bit difficult. So you can imagine that there are people that have been told, we have this individual, here's his skills, here's his wacky background. We think his wacky background is going to be useful. We need to place him into a power position where that wacky background could be useful under specific circumstances that we can't describe to you now. Go find a slot where we could move him in.
So you're talking about people who are more dispositioned to talk about ontology versus the grit of the material.
No, they haven't gotten to that point yet. So they're so far behind, Guy. No, they're so far behind the curve. They have yet to make that jump. We're just talking about people that could openly admit that aliens exist and just basically deal with it at that level.
We're talking basics here. Okay,
we're talking fundamental basics, right? So. So there would be the fear that you might get a bunch of fantasiists in if the government is not that savvy about surveying the Wu landscape. And that, I think, is one of the potentials for problems, all right? But I also think that they've got some kind of HR team or somebody looking at, but I also think because of what I've seen, that this HR team is not read in. Okay, they're not Wu guys, and they don't know who they're dealing with, and they're asking a bunch. This is how I find them: is that they're asking a bunch of questions of people that expose what they're doing. Right. So the questioner reveals more than the person who answers, and that's always true in all conversations.
Right. Now, speaking of HR team. Is it possible somehow that we're being monitored if in fact ETs are here and there's contention to be had, but there's communication to be had? Is it possible there's I know it's getting into speculation here, but I want to get your thoughts on this, that there is some type of either recruitment, HR team, evaluation team from an ET's perspective that's looking at the planet right now, maybe looking at Twitter, all of these feeds to figure out who perhaps they might have a potential positive communication with. How do you see that happening? And if the audience members are inclined to perhaps participate in that, as scary as a proposition as that may be, how do you think that's gonna, like, are they just gonna randomly drop in your backyard, or are they? Is there like a
so we don't know what tactic they would choose to present themselves, but I'm quite certain that they are indeed monitoring everything, right? And of course, if I'm sitting on a spaceship and I've got my spaceship that's being run by an AI that can swoop up any kind of frequencies I want, I'll just craft a quick little program and tell the AI computer on the ship to, hey, monitor all this stuff and find me some personalities that meet the following characteristics relative to what you find in their written posts.
Right.
And that's how I would proceed from an alien perspective, right? But it would be very dangerous to pop into people's backyards, especially if they're in like an urban environment, right? Just because you're going to trigger the neighbors. And also, it wouldn't be wise at this point, in my opinion. They're not going to do things like come on down and put a whole town to sleep in order that they can go and talk to the one guy that they need to chat with, right? They don't want to have that kind of heavy hand showing. They have to treat us very gently because they're basically inviting us to communicate and interact with them. And and they desperately don't want to initiate conflict where none need exist, because our response is going to be to go to nuclear weapons.
Right. Okay. In terms of that HR process, perhaps the ETs, if they're listening, they can simply look at the Ministry of Truth that was put up by the Biden administration and take that list. It's probably a good place to start. Probably a lot of good people on there we would want to talk to moving forward. Okay,
well,
guys.
Okay, but see, there's a lot more criteria to it than just our interaction with each other, right?
All right. Yeah. It's just the beginning. It's that first pre-screening level. You said, okay, I've made it, and now let's look at the different criterias, depending if you're talking about science or economy or social order or whatever. Okay, I'm having too much fun with this. Guys, please join us on the Rumble feed now. I'm going to bring that link back on the live chat for you guys here. If you're still in YouTube, please come and join us on the Rumble or